Overcoming adversity. What's it take? That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. Listen to this headline from Forbes, a Forbes piece from 2020, March 2020. It doesn't matter about the date. The theme is evergreen. How adversity makes you stronger. How do you feel about that statement? You believe it? Disbelieve it? You think it's stupid? I think that's the key to getting through life with a positive attitude and actually achieving your dreams. If you think that challenges shouldn't come when you are living out your God-given purpose in life, that's a mistake and you're going to be thrown off track. You could be doing everything right in life. You could be living out God's will. You could be working hard. You could be doing everything right in life. And count on this one thing. Challenges are going to occur. Unexpected events are going to rock your world, and adversity is going to come. Not all adversity is deserved, right? Bad things do happen to good people every day. Every day bad things happen to good people. Bad things happen to innocent people. The question is, what do you do when those bad things happen? How do you respond? And how you respond, that right there is the key to the successes that you are able to reach in life. Before I get into more of that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app at Real Life Network. That is the faith-based news outreach of Pastor Jack Hibbs's Calvary Chapel Chino Hills Church in California. It's a great network of news. It's all news from a faith-based perspective. And look, here we are, the show, talking about overcoming adversity. One of the key things you need to overcome adversity is faith. You need faith in something higher. Faith, hope, love, right? These are the things in the Bible that are everlasting. And if you don't have faith, then it's going to be very difficult, all the more difficult, to overcome the challenges that you're going to face in life every day to some degree, and some days to a greater degree than you could ever imagine. So Real Life Network, it's the place to go to get your faith-based news. And I'm happy to say, I'm humbled to say that Bold and Blunt has been part of RLN's lineup for quite some time now. So go there, get Bold and Blunt, but check out all the other offerings. You may also get Bold and Blunt at Washington Times, of course, right? Because Washington Times is my main platform for Bold and Blunt. And you can subscribe to my newsletter by going to washingtontimes.com. Scroll to the bottom of the page and find the newsletter section. Click on it and enter your email address under Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley, and you will be treated. You will get delivered to your email box 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. My emailed newsletter contains my commentaries that I write for the Washington Times every day, as well as my twice weekly Bold and Blunt podcast, as well as whatever else I put out, whether it's video versions of Bold and Blunt, or just lately, I just returned from a trip to Israel, which is why I'm a little bit stumbling over my words, by the way. The time change still is affecting me, and sleep is still interrupted. So forgive me if my tongue is twisting a little bit more than usual. But I did a photo slide thing of a thing. That's a great descriptor, isn't it? But anyhow, it's a photo slide, a batch of photos that I took while over in Israel. Very interesting. They just came out of strikes from Iran, right? Which is historic. And some of the buildings that I saw over there had their windows shaken by the reverberations from the strikes. And they're still in the cleanup phase. And talk about overcoming adversity, right? Resilience. That is the word that comes to mind when you think of the Jewish people and the Jewish nation. It's a word, in fact, that they themselves use frequently to describe their own people. So if you want a good example of overcoming adversity, visit Israel. Visit Israel. You don't have to go to such great lengths, though. You can also listen to this Bold and Blunt podcast, because I have a great guest today who's going to talk about overcoming adversity. So no need to hop on the plane just yet. You can just tune into Bold and Blunt, and then maybe later on down the line make that trip to Israel. You may also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are available. That was a little bit of a rabbit hole, but now back to the topic at hand: how adversity makes you stronger. Wasn't there a song? Something about whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I'm sure there are more than one out there. You know, if I had a better singing voice, I'd probably break in a song right now, but I'll spare you that torture, and I will just read from this Forbes piece. Like I said, it came out in March 2020, but the theme is the same, right? It doesn't change. When faced with a crisis, this writer writes in Forbes, it can be difficult in the moment to imagine the experience will eventually lead to some type of growth. Ain't that the truth, right? It's not as if we're sitting there in despair, in distress, and thinking, wow, someday this builds character, right? Isn't that what parents say? You know, they ground you for something you've done, and then they tell you, oh, you should welcome this. It builds character, right? And in the Bible, it's called loving God's discipline, right? God disciplines those whom he loves. it's sort of one of those things that when you look back on overcoming adversity, you can appreciate the growth and maturity and strength, right, and character that have come from that adversity. But in the midst of it, in the throes of it, that's the last thing you want to hear. You don't want to hear about some type of growth. Anyhow, back to Forbes. Resilience is a person's ability to bounce back from adversity and grow from the challenge. And research, look, they actually research such things. Who knew? And research now shows that past adversity can help you persevere in the face of current stress. Think about that, right? The more adversity you face in life, the more adversity just sort of rolls off your shoulders when it comes. You achieve that sort of the peace that surpasses understanding that is in the Bible, right? That comes from a walk in faith, that comes from a friendship with Christ, that comes from a walk with God. You get that inner peace that surpasses understanding. And it's based on the idea that in the Bible, it's based on a relationship with Christ. But here in this Forbes piece, they're talking about basically past adversity can help you persevere in the face of current stress. It's only common sense, because once you face down the beast in life, the more you face down that beast, that monster, the more you have a confidence in yourself that you will once again face down that beast. If you never face adversity, the first time you do, it's panic driven. It's what is happening here? Why is this happening to me? Oh my gosh, how am I going to get through this? But you do it a few times and you think, not a big deal. Right? I can get through this. And even if it is a big deal, even if it is something that is so insurmountable in grief that makes it unimaginable, the fact is you get through that. Life goes on, and once you get through that, it opens the doors to achieving that peace that surpasses all understanding, so that when the next adversity comes, it's not going to hit as hard. It's not going to rock your world. It's not going to shake your foundations. And then you become just, that even keel person, that one where the winds blow all around, but there you are just standing there and waiting patiently for the winds to stop. You don't have to fight everything, that some things God takes care of, that some things came into your life completely unwarranted, and it's not in your control to solve the issue at the time. You just have to withstand the pressure. You just have to stand and wait for the adversity to pass. And that makes you stronger in the end, right? We've all been there to various degrees. Remember, again, in the Bible, God only puts on your shoulders what he knows you can bear. Back to this Forbes piece. Let's see. Resilience is a person's ability to bounce back from adversity and grow from the challenge. And research now shows that past adversity can help you persevere in the face of current stress. Mark Seary and his colleagues studied a group of more than 2,300 people by asking them to report their lifetime exposure to a list of negative events grouped into 7 categories, Forbes writes. What they discovered is that people who experienced a moderate level of adversity reported better mental health and well-being and higher life satisfaction over time compared to both those groups who reported a high history of adversity and those with no history of adversity. Past struggles can help you become more resilient. That's the conclusion. And they go on and they list 5 different ways that past struggles do help you become more resilient. And I'll just briefly touch on those, but I just want to go back to something that these researchers discovered. They reported better mental health and well-being and higher life satisfaction over time, those who experienced a moderate level of adversity. So isn't that interesting? Because life in the last, couple decades has seemed in culture, in society, in education, right? In parenting, it seemed all about avoiding challenges in life. It seemed like our culture has shifted from that pull up by your own bootstraps and rugged independence and solve your own problems to an atmosphere of trying to avoid any problems in life. And it's become so ingrained in our culture that we are raising our kids to think that if they struggle, that something's wrong there, and they should be taking this pill. They should be taking this medication. They shouldn't have to deal with life's challenges. So we are raising a heavily medicated generation that blows in the wind at the slightest offense, right? I mean, forget having to deal with poverty and starvation and all kinds of financial distress and serious health ailments. We're raising a generation of children who, if somebody says something that hurts their feelings, they fall apart, and in a very public way. So I think really our nation could use a heavy dose of unavoidable adversity, if only to bring us back to a point, a national point in time where we have young people who can withstand problems, because past struggles, as Forbes write, can help you become more resilient in 5 ways. And let me just briefly touch on them without reading through the paragraphs. They increase empathy, right? If you've been through something, you can understand and empathize with those who've been through similar situations. Compassion is huge. 2, they can trigger post-traumatic growth, right? After the trauma, you grow, you learn, you become wiser, you become smarter, you become stronger. You reflect on what happened to you, and the rightful response to the adversity is to learn life lessons from it. They build self-efficacy. Self-efficacy, Forbes writes, is the belief or the confidence in your ability to overcome obstacles and challenges and succeed, right? That is a great feeling. I mean, you can see it on a day-to-day basis. Say you're driving down a road and you hit a nail and you get a flat, and there's nobody around, and your cell phone doesn't work. Right? What do? Well, in a situation like that, you learn. You learn how to deal with the trouble. You see the problem and you solve the problem. And after all, aren't problem solvers key to having a successful journey in life and contributing to the ability of an entire nation to problem solve and achieve success? Yes. All right, next one. They help you find the good. That's right. If you're wallowing in dark, there comes a time where you can either wallow or you can look for the silver lining. There's nobody in life that has such a hard challenge that they're facing right now that someone else in life isn't facing something harder. You can always find somebody who is going through something more difficult than you. And from that, you can at least say, there but for the grace of God go I. And I know some challenges are so heavy and so dark that that's a very small consolation. And yet it is still a consolation, right? It's something that you can look to. It's an anchor you can grasp during the dark times. And final one, they help you reframe stress as a challenge. Okay, that's a really good point, right? Because it's your response to things in life that matter. I think it's a common human condition to suffer things that you bring on yourself and suffer things that you did not bring on yourself. I mean, geez, read the book of Job, right? As a matter of fact, I'm reading the book of Job right now. And, there's a guy who didn't ask for all the adversity he had in life. And yet, if you respond in the proper way, instead of stressing, instead of panicking, instead of flying off the handle, instead of just living a life of just constant upheaval and chaos, you can look at it as a challenge. You can look at it as something that is a problem you're facing, something that is a very dark time, and what are you going to do? What are you going to do to it? And that will help you stay focused on the task at hand, on the matter at hand, which is to overcome that adversity instead of wallowing in fear and fright and all the negativity out there. And my guest today actually is going to go even deeper into the idea of overcoming adversity. You know her from Newsmax, Alison Maloni. You know her from her books that she's written, and she has a new one out that is simply 100% focused on overcoming adversity. It is called Rising Above, Empowering Stories of Women Overcoming what? Overcoming adversity. Alison, I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. It is so great to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited. It's I cannot wait to talk about this book and how it can hopefully help so many people who read it.
Yes, and I love the title, Rising Above, and then the subtitle, Empowering Stories of Women Overcoming Adversity. I love stories where people overcome challenges, but I'm curious, why target it about stories of women overcoming adversity? Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. A couple of reasons. I'm fortunate enough to have been working for Newsmax for about 6 years as a contributor and a host. And I've had the opportunity to interview so many women, beyond what everyone normally talks about. And after interviewing some of these women, I thought they need more than a 3-minute segment. Like they a powerful story. So that was one of the reasons that came to mind of why I wanted to write this book. But also, I started to see a shift on social media of how women were presenting themselves. They were finally coming out of their shell, Cheryl, and telling their story and not being afraid. I think for so long, women specifically were afraid to maybe even seem vulnerable, to talk about perhaps what happened in their past, because they would appear as weak, to a future employer, to their friends, to their family. And I started seeing women come out and be authentic and real. Gone are the days, at least the people I follow, of those who have the perfect life, right? They're showing the real messy things in their lives, and they're talking about divorce, they're talking about loss, they're talking about addiction. And by doing that, they're helping other people who are going through similar things. So the combination of both of those things, I had a number of women who I'd known, who I'd met and interviewed and even done some speaking events with, and asked them if they'd be willing to share their story. And they said, absolutely. And that's how the book came to be.
That's a very interesting answer because while I was listening to you, I was thinking about women I know in the Christian community specifically and in the church community who are oftentimes silent when they shouldn't be because they think it's the proper female role that they're supposed to maintain. And that sounds a little bit what you discovered.
It was. And you mentioned faith, the common theme for all of these women. There's 10. My story is in there. So there's 9 women plus me. The common theme with all of them is their faith. Now, some had lost it along the way, but they came back to it. One woman was actually recently baptized again. She had suffered addiction. She had the pills in her hand and was ready to commit suicide and leave everything. And so the one thing that they all said is that they just, when they had hit rock bottom or things were going, really tough, they turned to God. And that's actually, that's the hardest time when things are going rough. One woman lost both of her sons to fentanyl poisoning. So the hardest things that anybody can imagine that were going on are the times that they turned to their faith and it helped them through.
And, just doing that is very tough because if you're someone who has suffered so harshly in life that you're ready to commit suicide, part of your thinking, part of your mindset must be that God doesn't care. And so it's very difficult at that time to turn back to him, I would imagine.
Absolutely. And she said, this happened a couple of times that she thought about it, but something kept telling her, no, you have to live for it. She has a son. You have to live for your son. You have to live for your family. So whether that was God or one of her guardian angels, she listened to that voice and went through recovery and is a motivational speaker and has written books and has a successful business and has been sober for a number of years. So there was always that one point for all of these women that, something spoke to them and they said, okay, enough is enough. I'm going to forgive who I need to forgive, or I'm going to move forward. I'm going to get myself off that couch and figure out a solution to, whatever was going on in their lives.
How deep do you go into the stories with these women? I imagine these stories are extremely personal to them. And just for example, the woman who was going to commit suicide, does it have a beginning, a middle, an end, or did she just sort of give you the highlights?
Yeah, the beginning, middle, and end, and a lot of the women. I wouldn't say a lot. I would say half of the women had been victims of abuse when they were younger children, whether it was physical abuse or sexual abuse, or their parents were addicts. So they certainly have experienced things that unfortunately happens to a lot of people. So there are stories I take from, beginning to end. One of the women, she told her story for the first time. She had actually saved a couple of women from being sex trafficked up in Canada. And so she finally shared her story of what she had gone through. So yeah, it's definitely kind of a beginning, middle, and end. And fortunately, there's a happy ending, for all of these women, and resources that they used throughout their time that other people reading the book can use, or things that maybe help them along the way.
So how did you find these women? I know you said some of them you interviewed and 3 minutes wasn't enough, which I would imagine that is a very short amount of time for such a personal discussion. But how else did you find these women?
It was just through connections, through people I had known. So 2 of the women I had interviewed before, and then a few of the women we were doing a virtual speaking women's empowerment summit during COVID. And I had met Samantha Harris, who she used to be with Dancing with the Stars, and she's a 2-time breast cancer survivor. So I met her through that. And then also a woman who was in a terrible motorcycle accident, nearly lost her leg and had to rebuild her entire life. She too was a victim of sexual abuse when she was a young girl. And the thing that all of these women do that's different from a lot of people is they're helping others. So whether they are speaking or written books or have created movements, for example, Scarlett Lewis, whose son Jesse was a victim in the Sandy Hook, Connecticut school shooting. He actually saved a number of his classmates because he stepped in front of them. And so she created this Choose Love movement, which is in thousands of schools. It's in correction facilities. It's in multiple companies. And it helps people identify and talk about love and kind of get to the root of the problem. It's not therapy, but it's just a certain way of teaching and talking to people and understanding. So she turned her pain into purpose. She could have blamed everyone else. She could have blamed guns. She could have blamed the lack of security. She could have blamed whatever. But she decided we have to stop this. It's going to happen again. So how can we stop this? So these women are just making such a powerful difference. And that's what I love about them.
So someone listening right now is probably in the middle of some sort of challenge that is bringing them to a point of despair. And maybe they're listening and wondering, well, where's my happy ending? How come I'm not at the point these women have journeyed to in overcoming their challenges? What is the difference? What are some of the key differences between those who overcome adversity and also go on to shine brightly versus those who are sort of stuck in their adversity?
Sure. I think in a lot of them were stuck, and they talk about that a little bit, that, why me? I can't get out of this. I'm doing everything I should be doing. I'm praying. I'm making changes. I'm, some of them who were, suffering addiction. I'm in treatment. I'm sober. It takes time. And I do think their faith helped them, but the hardest thing to think about is when you're in it, that it's going to get better, but it always does. It just may take a little bit more time than we want, because we just want everything to fix itself immediately. And for some reason, there's always a reason that we go through these things. And it's really hard during that time to think that, wow, this must happen for a reason. People say it, but when you get out of that and you come out on the other side, you do realize that, okay, this did happen for a reason. So my advice in just speaking with these women is to just believe that it's going to get better, and just to constantly have that faith that it's going to change, and you're going to come out the other side.
It's really a very courageous thing to change when there are so many people in your life who see you as you are. And then when you go to try and make a dramatic change in your life, even the ones who support you may not give you the full support you want because they don't understand. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, it does. And I think a lot of these women, and even myself included, you start to, when you go through something really challenging and difficult, you start to kind of make your circle smaller. Well, you may make it a little bigger with different people, but I think you start to realize who are your true family and friends, and who really will support you, and who will listen to you, and who will be there for you, and know that you are changing. Things are changing. And, you want somebody to support you if you're getting a divorce, and you want somebody to support you if you're making a career move, or deciding, what, I don't want to sip a glass of alcohol again in my life. And those friends need to be okay with that. So I think a lot of these women went through a lot of changes when it came to their family and friends and support, and realizing, who were the real people in their lives who wanted to stay with them, even though they were making these changes.
I imagine in some challenges too, especially addictions, or for example, drug addicts, that becomes your own identity. And so making the change is difficult because you can't imagine yourself without that.
Sure. And when you have this addiction, you have to change a lot of your friends, and you have to change your lifestyle. You're so used to going, to a restaurant and having a glass of wine, and now you don't do that. So a lot of these women who had addiction had to take themselves out of situations and had to really rebuild themselves. And, instead of, doing what they had normally done, they would go to the gym, or they would go to church, or they would go to community events, or they would find their purpose. And I think all of these women, at the end of their chapter, they knew what their purpose was. And their purpose for all of them is to help other people. And, whether they're going through a similar situation, or just to give positive feedback and mindset to people that things will get better no matter what you're going through. And everybody's life is messy. And I think the big thing too, and I talk about it in my chapter, is social media. You think the grass is always greener. You think everybody has this perfect life. And when you're going through really tough times and you go on social media, it's even harder. So I always say, just declutter, get rid of those people that supposedly have the perfect lives, because they don't, and go follow and find people that you can relate to, that you can believe in, and that will support you. And if you want to stay on social media, follow those people, follow the positive mindset people, and stay away from all the negativity, because there's so much out there.
Yeah, that's a dangerous way to live, always looking to the grass being greener elsewhere.
Yes.
Can we talk about your own personal story? I know you put it in the book, but I think that would be interesting to talk about with you right now. Okay, can you tell a little bit, just the highlights of what you want people to know?
Sure, and I was apprehensive. I'm pretty much an open book, but there were some things that even my three daughters didn't know, and I thought, these women are brave enough to share their story. I need to as well. So just a quick synopsis. I had a lot of loss in my childhood. I lost my mom at the age of 4 to lymphoma. My dad was a Vietnam vet, had PTSD, so he pretty much took himself out of my life. Went to go live with my grandparents. My grandmother had passed away, so then I had quickly moved in with my aunt and uncle. So I'd already lost a lot of people within a short amount of time. And at the age of 9, a little boy told me I was fat. And for some reason, I listened to him and believed him. And so I developed an eating disorder at the age of 9.
Wow.
And but, my aunt and uncle, who essentially adopted me, got me therapy. Life was good, throughout high school, college, successful in the job market, and then had a divorce, and then was about to be remarried, and saw some things that were red flags. Nearly lost my business, had $10 to my name with 3 children as a single mom, and had to rebuild my business, rebuild my life, and go from there. So I clearly had to turn to my faith and my close friends and family. And my story is nothing compared to these women, but I think, again, people, if they saw on social media, it looks like, wow, she's successful and has these beautiful children, but they didn't really know what was going on behind the scenes. So I felt that, I wanted to share that, because a lot of people, have certain things that go on in their lives that, they don't want to talk about. But when they do, it's almost like therapy. They feel a little better when they share that story.
$10 to your name with 3 children. What was that like, and how did what was the before and after of that?
Yeah, it was scary. I had essentially, when I was about to be married to this person, I had essentially kind of, put my business aside and trusted them that, I was going to start a new life, and that didn't happen. And so, I thank God my aunt and uncle, my parents, they let me borrow money. They let me borrow money to get groceries. And then I put on my big girl pants, as I say, because I'd be sulking on the couch saying, why me? How come this? This isn't right. This isn't fair. I'm so hurt. Why am I not enough? And that was the common theme. I always felt that I wasn't enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not skinny enough, going back to the eating disorder. I'm not smart enough. I'm not all of these things. And so that, in my mind, that's why all that happened to me, which is not correct. But I worked my butt off to try and get clients. I have a PR company. So I just worked night and day and slowly rebuilt my business. I had a Peloton bike and I sold it. I put it on the Facebook marketplace and I said, okay, there we go. I can pay a couple of bills with that. I mean, I was selling things that I didn't need so I could put food on the table for my girls. And, I promised myself I would never be in that situation again. And I would, always, rely on myself. Not that you don't trust other people, but never let your guard down. And I haven't.
It's the struggle that makes things good, though, right? I mean,
it is.
And I know our time is over, but I just wanted to finish with this one question. When you were talking to the people, when you were talking to the women and writing up their stories, was there anyone that just struck you, I don't know, more intense or struck you harder than the others?
Sure. Scarlett Lewis, the mom who lost her son in the Sandy Hook shooting, Her story is just so vivid, and the things that, she experienced, as a mom. And I remember that happening. It's not too far. It's about an hour from where I live. I live in Massachusetts. And I remember that happening. And from that day on, I just remember putting my kids on the bus and always thinking, oh God, I pray that nothing happens. You send your kids to school and you think they're going to be safe. So that was a story that really just struck with me. And I've interviewed her a few times and I just lost it. I'm crying and she's staying strong and I'm the one losing it because I just can't even imagine, what she went through when she was standing there in the parking lot waiting for them to tell her, yes, your son's okay. But she knew in her gut that he wasn't. And to have anybody go through that is just horrific.
Wow. Alison Maloni, rising above, empowering stories of women overcoming adversity, including your own story. Can't wait to read your book. What a very enlightening or inspirational book at this time in America. Thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Don't you just love stories of people overcoming adversity and going on and becoming successes and everything that God intended them to be in life? Very motivational, very inspiring. I want to thank you for listening. Remind you, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at WashingtonTimes.com, and of course, wherever podcasts are available. Tune in next time. Meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.